This is hopefully the last video in our reading of R.H. Tawney's comments on Luther's invention of religion in his seminal work, Religion and the Rise of Capitalism. Last time we did this formulation of Tawney that according to Luther, God speaks to the soul, not through the mediation of the priesthood or of social institutions built up by man. And I said last time that this includes, logically speaking anyway, the corpus of knowledge, corpus of Christian knowledge, which was developed to understand the Word of God. So without the mediation of any outward institutions or teachings or mediation, but solus cum solo, one-to-one relationship with God as a voice in the heart and in the heart alone. So God speaks to you directly. So even Bible as a book would, I think, logically be something external. So when God speaks to you, so although Luther, the whole Lutheran or Reformation movement was based on the authority of Bible, but I think that was the Bible which God was speaking to you directly, not the Bible. So there might be the same words, but when God speaks to you directly, then you understand its meaning. So thus the bridges between the worlds of spirit and or of sense are broken. So the bridge between external and internal is broken, and the soul is isolated from the society of men, that may enter into communion with its maker. And as I said, the thing is that as an actual fact, soul or heart or whatever you call it, it is constituted, as far as I understand it, constituted through set of relationships, set of relations. It finds itself situated. It finds itself situated in. So the soul or heart which is being considered here in isolation from all sets of relations, is always already constituted by those set of relations. And I'm not saying that those set of relations which constitute this heart or soul are deterministic. That constitution is enabling as well. It has its limits as well. So even freedom works within those set of relations. And this constituted soul or heart all itself, constitute external relations in turn. So when we talk about heart in isolation from all sorts of relations, at most what we can do is, and this is a negative attitude or negative attitude or way out of the existing set of relations. So the option is not to go into overcoming these set of relations and go up to some sort of void where there's only heart and there's another heart. But you are necessarily going to move from this set of relations to other set of relations, which will in turn constitute who you are, and you will constitute them to a certain extent as well. And if you leave this void, something is going to fill it, because this can't remain void. And as we saw, what Luther's ideas, I'm not talking about any causal relations, but I mean, logically speaking, what they do, or I'm sure in actuality they must have contributed to this process to a certain extent, was to provide, so you wage a war against existing set of external relations and institutions and teachings, and sort of, let's say, destroy them or weaken them and empty them out. And you don't try to rebuild those institutions or replace them with new ones. So leave them. So you leave this space void, but you hand them over to the secular, and those institutions were built. New secular institutions and rules and regulations will slowly emerge and replace those. And now your heart is situated within those, even though you may pretend, and some people might be able to achieve that break, but it's very hard and very rare, at least not for masses. Now your heart is situated and constituted by these new set of relations. So even though you may claim that you have one-to-one relation with God and you're listening to His voice without any mediation, the mediation is always there. It's just that it's a new set of mediation. Now the secular actually guides and dominates, provide the context for the sacred. So that's my view, and I think Tawney doesn't say in these words, but I think that's what his interpretation, which we have been looking at, seems to me to be in the same vein. Yeah. Okay, so God speaks to the soul not through the mediation of the priesthood or of social institution built up by man, but solus cum solo, as a voice in the heart, and in the heart alone. Thus, the bridges between the worlds of spirit and of sense are broken, and the soul is isolated from the society of men. And as I said, it's isolated from one set of society of men and has been resituated in another form of society of men. and women, that it may enter into communion with its maker. The grace that is freely bestowed upon it may overflow in its social relation. So this one-to-one with heart. So you don't actually, unlike Catholic Christianity, for example, you don't build new set of relations as expression of your this new spiritual experience. So you don't externalize it, you don't express it in forms of rules, regulation, institutions. You don't build new forms of life in order to make these spiritual experiences available to masses in one form or another, because you think that would be degrading this experience. But obviously you don't deny that this may overflow and actually affect the external relations, but this is not intentional, this is not a project, and what is manifested here in this spontaneous overflow is going to be imperfect, etc. And it doesn't have any religious significance as far as the logic goes, anyway. Yeah. So the grace that is freely bestowed upon it, that is the heart, may overflow in its social relations, but and now those social relations are all secular in this, because religious community has been overcome or destroyed and overcome. But those relations can supply no particle of spiritual nourishment. Not just because they're secular, but because externality has nothing to do with the spirituality, and vice versa, to make easier the reception of grace. So institutions can't form institution relations, rituals, anything external cannot be part of the expression or the conditions of this solo relationship. And I think logically this special relationship also cannot supply any particle of social reformulation or social expression. So like the primeval confusion into which the fallen angel plunged on his fatal mission, they are a chaos of brute matter, a wilderness of dry bones, a desert unsanctified and incapable of contributing to sanctification. Just generally, and also because it is secular now, so it is certain that absolutely none among outward things, under whatever name they may be reckoned, has any influence in producing Christian righteousness or liberty. And I think, logically speaking, Christian righteousness and liberty can't have any influence on those outward things either. Even the overflow and just overflow can't do much, and even if it does, it's going to be imperfect and it shouldn't be considered as sanctified anyway. So it is certain that absolutely, that's I think Luther's own words, it is certain that absolutely none among outward things, under whatever name they may be reckoned, has any influence in producing Christian righteousness or liberty, which in turn has no influence or shouldn't have any influence on anything external. One thing and one alone is necessary for life, justification and Christian liberty, and that is the most holy word of God, the gospel of Christ. But as I've been saying, that gospel of Christ is not the gospel written in books, but the gospel which is revealed to you in this one-to-one solo relationship. So this is astounding. This is one of the most, and its relationship with modernity should be very obvious in the sense that this absolute individualism cut off from all relation is something very, very more modern. And the Descartes' experience, for example, parallels this in one way on the epistemological level, obviously. The difference between loving men as a result of first loving God and learning to love God through growing love for men may not at first sight appear profound. To Luther it seems an abyss, and Luther was right. So seeing community of love as the expression of and conducive to the love of God is something out of question. And loving God is something in this void of two atomistic self, and this love has nothing. This love takes nothing from outside and gives nothing to the outside. So it basically drowns in the depth or emptiness or whatever of this relationship. And if it does overflow outward, it doesn't have any religious or spiritual significance. To Luther, it seemed an abyss, and Luther was right. It was, in a sense, nothing less than the Reformation itself. This is the Reformation. This atomistic chimera, cutting off, destroying all institutions, religious institutions, spiritual institutions, and redefining spirituality as these two relationship between two atoms, which has nothing to do with two monads, Leibniz's monads, I guess. It was, in a sense, nothing less than the Reformation itself, for carried as it was not carried by Luther. This is very important. So not everything we are saying was actually thought through by Luther in this way. We are talking about some of the things which logically form his ideas. For carried as it was not carried by Luther to its logical result, the argument made not only good works, but sacraments and the church itself unnecessary. Religion itself necessary in all its external manifestation. The book of God itself unnecessary in its external manifestation. And basically religion has been reduced to these 2 points, in this 2-point in void, in which one is supposed to be your heart and others voice of God, even though you clearly can't know which one is which, or even if you are just talking to yourself or it's just silence. But that's another thing. But this is Amazing. For carried as it was not carried by Luther to its logical result, the argument made not only good works but sacraments and the church itself unnecessary. And this logical conclusion was drawn later by at least some of the idealist philosophers. The question of the religious significance of that change of emphasis, that's an understatement, and of the validity of the intellectual process by which Luther reached his conclusions is one for theologians. Its effects on social theory were staggering, in the sense that the whole notion of spiritual community was rejected and transcended. Since salvation is bestowed by the operation of grace in the heart, and by that alone, the whole fabric of organized religion. And by organized religion, we mean church, we mean good works, we mean institution, we mean monasteries, we mean the whole institution of monasticism, the whole religious community, law, whole corpus of knowledge, scholasticism, interpretation, hermeneutics, Bible itself. This is what I mean by organized religion. And when people say we don't believe in organized religion, that's what they're talking about without knowing it. That for them, religion or spirituality is this interaction with two dots. Since salvation is bestowed by the operation of grace in the heart, and by that alone, the whole fabric of organized religion, which had mediated between the individual soul and its maker, divinely commissioned hierarchy, social hierarchy at least, systematized activities, corporate institutions, drops away as the blasphemous trivialities of a religion of works. The whole community under God or under Christ is rejected as, or drops away as, the blasphemous trivialities of a religion of works. The medieval conception of a social order, etc. Grace no longer completed nature, completed anything. It was the antithesis of it. So grace didn't reform, imperfectly, but reform the external, the society, the community. It stood as antithesis to that. It's a negation of it, as long as it was religious externality, and when the secular was, it just sanctioned it but didn't interact with it, at least not in theory. Even though in reality, obviously, you can't. There's no isolation as such. So man's actions as a member of society were no longer the extension of this life as a child of God. So in reality, in Catholic Christianity, in other religion, and non-religious civilization as well, your spirituality informs your externality. It's formed by your externality, and it's made possible by that. And in turn, your action, the members of society are seen as the expression of your inner reality, your inner experience, your inner depth. But here, that connection is cut. They are negation of each other. Secular interests cease to possess even remotely a religious significance. So outward relations have no religious significance. but they were sanctioned by religion, as you know. So they might compete with religion, but they could not enrich it. But in fact, there's no religion anymore, because what religion has reduced to is this relationship between two dots, which is obviously, even though it's denied, it's now ruled by secular. So in fact, there's no gulf between secular and religion at all, because religion is reduced to nothing, and what rules is secular. And you can sanctify it by claiming that this is what is sacred. And that's what happens. Detailed rules of conduct, a Christian casuistry, Christian casuistry, or casuistry, are needless or objectionable. Now they will be replaced by secular casuistry. The Christian has a sufficient guide in the Bible, but the Bible which is being revealed on your heart, and you interpret it according to your own inner freedom and in his own conscience. He has a certain guide in the Bible and in his own conscience, and ultimately just the conscience, because that's what tells you what Bible. In one sense, the distinction between the secular and the religious life vanished. That's true. Because religion, there's no religion. Monasticism was so to speak, secularized. All men stood henceforth on the same footing towards God. Monasticism is secularized in the sense that the context for this two relationship between these thoughts is now provided by secular society and secular sciences, especially psychology. All men stood on the same footing. For though it might be in other sense, the distinction become more profound than ever. The distinction between the sacred and the. For though all might be sanctified, it was their inner life alone which could partake of sanctification. The world was divided into good and evil, light and darkness, spirit and matter. The division between them was absolute. No human effort could span the chasm. This is one way of looking at it, but if the spirituality is really being governed by secular, then there's no chasm really. And in one way. And if there is a chasm, that is the chasm between the inner void and the outer void in a secular society. I think that's basically what I wanted to cover, and this and we'll continue this. I think this is a huge revolution, and understanding it was so very important for understanding the modern world, understanding modernism, and understanding liberalism. Thank you.